How important is mentality in realistic self-defense shooting?
I think there's a couple different things that come up when people talk about mentality, like your mental preparation, things like that. It's absolutely vital when someone comes in to prepare themselves to use a firearm for personal defense, to defend themselves or others. So you've got like family defense, you've got the armed professionals. Like it's incredibly important that people have made the decision before they show up for the class that, yeah, they get it. Like there is evil. You may be visited by that evil, and you need to be prepared to defend yourself or others with any means possible. And you've chosen the means of a firearm as an option. You know, if you don't show up to the training with that, I think you end up distracting yourself from the skill development, the physical things, because you're still asking some of those mental questions. There are other classes that are great for that. Your concealed carry classes, your introduction to defensive firearms classes. But if you're coming out to like a CFS class, we expect that, you know, the students have made that decision already, because that's a higher level, pure defensive shooting class, as opposed to a class that's more for target shooting or firearms general knowledge.
For a beginning shooter, how would you recommend to set up their training routine or frequency of training?
For the beginning defensive shooter, the thing that's important is reps over time, and especially front loading that practice close to when you first learn something, right? So if you go to a class, it's really important that you go out and get practice and get those reps soon thereafter. So it's impossible to say, you know, you have to train 1,000 rounds a month, or you have to train 2 times a week. People's training resources, interest, budget, all those things are variables. But as much as you can, you know, if you're just barely stretching to be able to attend a class in terms of time, budget, ammunition, and you aren't going to have the chance to practice, you may lose a lot of the value of that class. So I really encourage people not to, you know, sort of put all their training resources into just the class or into just the gear. Make sure you save some stuff for practice, because it is important to get those reps. And again, the reps over time is how you own a skill. You can't just practice a lot one weekend and expect that 2 years later you'll still be just as good.
What are a few of the biggest misconceptions in self-defense shooting?
One of the biggest misconceptions in self-defense shooting is that you need super high-level shooting skills to consider yourself capable of defending yourself with a gun. There's a big difference between shooting skill and defensive shooting skill. If you just want to be a world-class target shooter, that's going to take a lot more time, effort, and energy. If you want to be able to defend yourself with a gun, you know, the geometry problem, so to speak, of defensive shooting is generally pretty simple. It's hit the chest multiple times at relatively close ranges. That's how we stop bad guys with handguns. And the nature of personal defense shootings is that the bad guy's probably going to be pretty close, and he's probably going to be squared off to you. So sure, you can find the anomalies, you can find the exceptions, but you know, we wouldn't expect somebody to be able to pull out a pistol and stop a bad guy 150 yards away with a headshot. So just because it could happen, or we could say it's possible, doesn't mean we need to train for it. So a lot of people are very intimidated by the idea of, you know, coming out and be able to shoot a one-hole group at 25 yards, or they want to buy a piece of gear, a gun that will allow them to easily shoot, you know, a 3-inch group at 30 yards. Well, that's not really a practical defensive shooting skill. So I think that's one of the biggest issues we deal with a lot of students, is they realize pretty quickly that it's not about the precision marksmanship skill development, it's the ability to use a gun efficiently and apply fundamental defensive shooting skills in the context that they're actually needed.
How important is fitness and conditioning for the defensive shooting practitioner?
I think not just defensive shooting, but really just all personal defense. You know, personal defense, to me, personal defense preparation means you're willing to put time, effort, and energy into being prepared to defend yourself, right? To be able to take care of yourself. Well, if you're not taking care of yourself by being fit, if you're not taking care of yourself by being able to get up out of the couch, you know, I know some guys guys I've spent time with, guys I'm friends with, guys I've been in their homes, you know, who will talk a lot about, you know, what they would do and what they can do with the gun, and all they're talking about is timers and tape measures. You know, I've seen them in their recliners, and I've seen them have have to huff and puff just to get out of them to change the channel on a remote control. So the idea that they're going to magically jump out of that chair and draw the gun that they're laying on and shoot someone in 1.5 seconds because that's what they can do on the range on a timer at the IDPA match, they're fooling themselves, you know. So there's a place where, you know, sure, ultimately there's a component of defense that's about a tool, but primarily and 100% of your life, your primary tool is your body, right? So if you're not taking care of your body, you're not really doing everything you can. Too many people want it to be about their hobby. If their hobby is shooting, they focus on shooting. If they're really being honest about being able to take care of themselves, then fitness and health has to be part of it.
What is your preferred way to carry concealed and why?
Generally, I carry appendix. It's a relatively convenient position for me. My body type, the type of gun I carry, the way I dress, appendix carry of a subcompact gun, or like on my custom 26L, which is a 19 size slide with a 26 Glock models size grip, that fits really well for me. A J-frame revolver would fit really well for me. A Glock 26 would fit really well for me there. If I chose to carry a Glock 17, that position wouldn't work for me. If I chose to dress differently, that position wouldn't work for me. So everyone, I think, has to find their own, you know, perfect fit in terms of gun, holster, position, clothing style, all of that. I definitely recommend that people cater to their body type first and their dress style second, and then their environment, their kind of workplace and how they move their body and how they're positioned around other people third. Don't buy a gun and a holster because you like that gun and you like that holster and then try to change everything else. I don't think that's very realistic.
What makes combat-focused shooting a unique and essential training course in your eyes?
CFS approaches defensive shooting from the context of here's what happens over and over and over again, right? We've watched all the dash camera videos, we've watched the surveillance camera videos, we've seen how scenarios play out, high-level reality-based training scenarios. What keeps happening? Well, if that keeps happening, and in some cases, despite, you know, decades of training to the contrary, right? We've seen plenty of dash camera videos of police officers who did nothing but, you know, 10 plus, maybe 15 years of, you know, weaver position, bent elbow, bladed target shooting in their qualification courses. They get into a shooting on the range and, you know, what do? They orient towards the threat, they lower their center of gravity, they drive out with either one hand or both hands. We don't see this. Well, if we don't see that, I don't care how good a shooter it makes you in IDPA. I don't care how good a shooter it makes you in a qualification course. That's kind of irrelevant. Let's focus on what's actually happening out there and then try to refine it. So rather than, the biggest thing with CFS, going back to the question, rather than isolate how to be the best shooter in a controlled environment, let's worry about how to be as efficient as possible, being as good a shooter as we need to be in the context of an actual fight.
What are the concepts behind counter-ambush theory?
The counter-ambush concept says that, you know, if you saw the fight coming, you'd avoid it, right? For years, we know, the industry, we preach de-escalation, avoidance, living your life in a smart way, avoiding, you know, like Farnham, you know, always says, you know, avoid bad people, avoid bad places, avoid doing bad things, you know, or stupid people, stupid places, stupid things. Get away from that. If you get away from that, you're probably not going to need to defend yourself. So the premise is, well, okay, if we're doing that, if we're sitting with our back to the wall, if we're aware of our environment, if we're choosing good places to go and being around good people and doing smart things, we're probably not going to need the gun. So de facto, you're probably going to need the gun at the time when you weren't expecting it, when you weren't doing those things, when you didn't know there was a bad guy hiding behind that car in the parking lot. If you knew that, if you had done your surveillance lap or whatever you were doing to avoid coming into confrontation with the guy who was hiding behind the car, you don't need your gun. So by definition, the time you need your gun is the time you didn't plan for, the time you were unaware, the time you were surprised, you were caught off guard. That's the ambush. So by training in a way that doesn't presume you're going to be on balance, right? And this is my problem with on balance training models. If you're really on balance, you're going to avoid the fight. If you're really on balance, even if you do have to get into the fight, your fight is easier. The fight is harder if you're caught off guard, right? If we're doing this video and some guy jumps out from behind that house and attacks us right now, that's harder than if we heard a gunshot and we said, hey, there's a guy over there behind that house hurting somebody. Let's get our gun in the ready position and get ready. Now this fight is easier. So I don't want to just train for that easier fight. I'd rather train for the caught off guard moment and getting my gun out and driving out and shooting than train for the on balance moment. Now, I'm not going to do as well. My times aren't going to be as fast on the timer. My groups aren't going to be as tight if I'm in an unorthodox position, but the training is more realistic and it's more imperative. And then if I do have that situation occur where the shot goes off and we're like, whoa, I wonder if there's a bad guy in the area, and we go to the ready position, good, now our fight just became easier because we are on balance. So the counter ambush training methodology is characterized by things like processing information while you're executing the motor skills, processing the information immediately before, and then also congruent with executing the motor skills. So in other words, I don't say to you, hey, you're going to need to fire 3 shots into the chest, then 2 shots into the head. Do you understand the course of fire? Okay, stand by, you know, and you visualize it, and you dig your heels in, and you're waiting for the buzzer, and you're just performing an act that you already know you're going to have to do. That's much, much easier mechanically, right, in terms of sports and athletic skill performance than if I just say, go, and you don't know what you're supposed to do. And when I say go, you look at the target, and the only thing you can see is the head. Okay, well, you're going to have to slow down and take that headshot. You know, or maybe we have a target like we use our CFS target where there's a lot of different commands we could give, and you have to recognize the command, process it, and then execute the motor skill. So if I say A, you've got to find the box with the A in it, recognize it as a chest-sized box, get your gun out, drive out, and fire multiple shots. The next command might require you to take a sighted shot at twice as far away. It might require you to shoot a target 1/3 the size. There's a lot of different things we can do in their training environment to cause people to have to make decisions as they're executing the skills, and that's what you do at the mall. If you're at the mall, you're not thinking about shooting somebody in the chest 3 times, you're thinking about buying a shirt. And then you realize, oh man, I need to shoot that guy in the chest. And after the 3rd shot, when he drops the rifle or falls down or turns and runs away, you realize you don't need to shoot anymore. And that's decision making with the motor skills. And that's a huge, huge physical component of counter ambush training.